Time to get locked into the best Sooner recruiting and football news with Parker Thune and Grayson Singleton.
You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up.
Hit the guys up on the Riverwind Casino call-in line at 405-329-9000 or text the show on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line at 405-651-3439.
Do it! Just do it!
Now, with Locked In, here's Parker Thune and Grayson Singleton.
That is who we are. And this is, of course, Locked In here on the Ref, the home of Sooner fans. It feels kind of odd, Grayson, to be doing two separate shows in tandem with one another. I don't really know where our last show ends and where our new show begins. Technically, I suppose that distinguishing mark is the 2 o'clock hour. But for all intents and purposes, it is hour 3 of Poke Willie and Thune at noon. That's what it is this week. Steely is out on vacation, so Grayson's been filling in, doing 3 full hours of radio every day this week. So shout out to him for pulling the extra weight in the absence of the old man. But you're accustomed to hearing this duo at 2 o'clock every single weekday, talking OU football and recruiting, and obviously the biggest topic in the world of OU athletics right now is the Jim Knowles conversation. Is Oklahoma going to be able to close the deal with Jim Knowles? Josh from Moore informs us that flight tracking has begun. So that's how you know we are deep in the throes of this thing. You got people checking on the flights to see whether Jim Knowles has a plane landing in Norman, Oklahoma, or OKC, or any of the surrounding areas anytime soon. But you can chime in throughout the show at 405-651-3439, and we encourage you guys to do that because you have thoughts, you have opinions. Obviously, this week there are plenty of them as Oklahoma prepares to hire their next defensive coordinator. Who that is, we're not entirely clear yet, but the signs seem to point towards Oklahoma hiring Jim Knowles from Ohio State. Whenever that is official, finalized, obviously you guys will know. In the meantime, it's just talk. We're talking about what this looks like practically for Oklahoma in terms of staffing, what other dominoes might fall, what other pieces might move. And in the meantime, that has provided plenty of fodder and plenty of fun conversations throughout the week here on these very airwaves. Chris from Knoxville asks a good question to open us up, which is, hey, Parker, have any notable Ohio State insiders opened talk about the Jim Knowles smoke in the last 24 hours, or are they in the dark as well? And, Grayson, I don't know how much you've been following things from the Ohio State side, but from what I have read and from what I have learned, it's been more than 24 hours that they've been aware of the conversations, the discussions surrounding Jim Knowles and Oklahoma being a potential match. I mean, Jim Knowles was asked about it on Saturday. So if folks on the Ohio State side weren't already aware of it by then, they certainly have been for the last 4 days. Now, there is something that I feel like I've heard it from enough people that I can go ahead and put it out there now. And I'm sure it's something that many of you guys have heard through the grapevine as well. And I don't know this for a fact because I don't cover Ohio State as a program, but just talking to people that have connections on that end, Grayson, one thing that I've picked up on is that there has been some tension, there has been some animosity between Jim Knowles and a couple other members of the Ohio State defensive staff, such that there are those on the Ohio State side that feel, regardless of whether it's Oklahoma or another institution or an NFL franchise, whatever it may be, Jim Knowles is just getting out of Columbus. One way or another, he's getting out. So I don't necessarily know that to be an indisputable fact. Again, I do not cover Ohio State, but talking to people from that side, I have gotten that impression that there's a little bit more than meets the eye to the situation with Jim Knowles and Ohio State, and that it hasn't been as harmonious as you would like it to be in his shoes.
Well, it's interesting that no matter how inharmonious it has been, they still won a natty. the fact shows that he is a guy who can just go ahead and make it work and do his job. Him coming to Norman, it's to me it's a matter of time. That's where I'm at. I've taken what everybody feels from around the country and compared it to what you feel and what the guys on this station are talking about, and then you just weigh other natural, external, and internal factors. It seems to be happening. It seems like this is going to happen, and now the question becomes the natural ones. Is he going to bring somebody over from the staff? What does that do to the current Oklahoma staff? Is he going to be able to bring any players? No, he's not bringing Caleb Downs. You can probably give up on that one. But it's now to me, and look, things can happen. Things have happened to Oklahoma. Things have happened to other places where you can preemptively jump the gun and start having the next conversations, certainly the natural ones, and then something turns around and it doesn't happen in your favor. I get that. But at this point in time, now you're projecting past the official hire. I think that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that all your OU football and recruiting intel, all of the stuff that I can't say on these airwaves, you will learn over there at OUinsider.com. But there are at least three support staffers that have been specifically mentioned to me as guys that would likely follow Knowles to Oklahoma if and when he takes the job. Now, the Waffler on the text line asks, has anyone from Ohio State entered the transfer portal? In terms of notable defensive players, to this point, the only one that has entered the transfer portal that would be of any concern to Oklahoma fans would be former four-star cornerback Calvin Simpson Hunt. He played his high school ball at Waxahachie down in Texas. That's a school that Oklahoma has plenty of familiarity with. Oklahoma offered him and recruited him out of high school. He was a member of the 2023 class. He was a phenomenal track athlete in high school, a top 50 prospect on the defensive side of the ball as a corner, and originally committed to Texas Tech. OU tried to flip him from Texas Tech. They did not succeed, but Ohio State did. Now, early intel that I have picked up on that situation, because obviously Oklahoma is in search, maybe not actively, but certainly keeping an eye out for another cornerback as they move ahead into the spring. The early intel that I have gleaned is as follows. One, Jay Valai was actually at Waxahachie High School yesterday morning. So nice timing on that. But despite the natural dots that are to be connected there, I have also been told it's altogether likely that Calvin Simpson Hunt and OU are not going to be a match. So I don't necessarily know where he's going to wind up. Doesn't sound, at least from the early indications, as though it will be Oklahoma. Kyle from Salisaw on the text line asks, do we feel like with Arbuckle and possibly Knowles that if we get Knowles also, it buys Venables another year or two to get this thing together? And we had this conversation quite extensively yesterday, Grayson. But if you hire Jim Knowles, I don't think, unless it's objectively catastrophically bad, that you're moving on from Brent Venables after 2025. This feels like a 2-year commitment. And there's always an asterisk because at the University of Oklahoma or any program with a similarly decorated football tradition, if things get bad enough, you're going to cut the cord no matter what. No matter what it costs, no matter what the ancillary casualties are, you're going to cut the cord. But provided it's not that bad, it would seem you're counting on Brent Venables being your head coach in 2026 and hopefully possibly beyond that if you bring in Jim Knowles as DC.
And the direction that conversation took yesterday is the same direction I'll take that today.
Oh boy, here we go.
I don't think you know where I'm going to go with this. We've regurgitated some of our conversations from yesterday. I'm going to say it again. I don't think that Brent Venables' body of work to this point, on January 22nd, 2025, whether he pulls off the hire of Jim Knowles or not, it does not warrant any sort of confidence past 2025. Period, point blank, end of story. You can't go 6-7 2 out of your first 3 years, and then your 10-3 year lose to Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Kansas. I just don't think that works. I have not been a part of the Norman community for that long, but I know that doesn't work at the University of Oklahoma. So, in just objectively looking, if you're not trying to turn around a program, you shouldn't, at a blue blood program, go 6-7, 10-3, 6-7. That just doesn't work. I get the injuries from this year. I do. But he hasn't done enough as a coach for you to completely bypass all of the injuries too and say, you know what, you get a complete pass here. So, yes, the potential hire of a new defensive coordinator makes sense. To me, it's them giving Brent Venables all of the ammunition and all of the equipment needed to keep his job so they don't look like idiots for signing him to an extension potentially prematurely. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a gamble on top of a gamble at this point, and it's not a terribly long shot, which I think is what I like. You know, if you want to make this thing work long term, bringing in a guy like Jim Knowles is a very easy way to make sure you're in position to win more football games in 2025 and stabilize this thing moving forward. But it's almost as if you bought a luxury car with a down payment, that luxury car in this circumstance being Brent Venables, and now you're going to the casino to try and see if you can come out a little bit richer to help yourself make those payments a little easier. Because you're going to have to make the payments one way or another, right? And so, Oklahoma's going to have to pay out Brent Venables' contract, whether they do it over the course of the time that he is coaching Oklahoma or whether they're paying it out in dead money after they fire him. One way or another, you have to make the payments. And so, to me, man, I think this is just Oklahoma going full speed ahead for the 2025 season, expecting to win the bet, expecting that things will improve, expecting that with the hire of Jim Knowles, you're going to win more football games and you're going to leave your fan base feeling more comfortable and more confident about the state of your institution than they are right now or that they have been at really any point throughout the Venables era. Now, this is another good text from a 405 listener. If Venables is calling defense full-time again, I think we can forget about all the details improving, including things like clock management. If anything, they will likely get worse. Things weren't improving in this area when Brent wasn't calling the defense full-time. How would they be better? Bingo. I mean, there's so many reasons why it behooves a college head coach these days, especially a head coach at a program like the University of Oklahoma, to operate in more of a CEO role than a hands-on role. And there are some coaches that just will not relinquish that control. Another great example of this phenomenon would be Lincoln Riley, right? Lincoln Riley's never going to hire an offensive coordinator. Now, Lincoln Riley's a really good offensive mind, right? But in much the same way, Brent Venables is a really good defensive mind. At a certain point, there's going to come a reckoning. And apparently it hasn't come for USC yet. It's certainly come for But at the very least, you know that you're going to continue to play great defense, as opposed to having BV take on that CEO role and passing off defensive play calling responsibilities to somebody that is worthy of much less trust than Jim Knowles and having to sweat whether or not the defense is going to live up to the billing and continue to improve upon the good things that they've done each of the last 3 years as they've steadily gotten better and better, more and more talented, and more consistent. A lot of texts. They're starting to stack up here on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line, so we'll dive into them on the other side here. 405-651-3439. Let's hit a quick break. I'm out at Caven's Group today. 405-573-3048 or cavensgroup.com is how you can get in touch with Gary and the folks out here. If you're dealing with an emergency situation of any kind, water, fire, mold, and the like, they got you covered 24/7, 365. Keep it right here on the Ref. The home of Sooner fans. We'll be back.
Hornsdown Apple Pie Liquor is not your grandma's apple pie unless your grandma was a moonshiner with a PhD in flavor. This all-natural, 6-time distilled spirit is sure to light up any party, tailgate, or special occasion. Whether toasting a touchdown or yelling at the umps because Spike was safe, Hornsdown Apple Pie is the perfect drink for celebrating the highs and lows of life in Oklahoma. Hornsdown celebrates all of you who cheer from the berm, tailgate, on Lindsay Street, and wreak havoc on social media. You can find our red bottle at your local liquor store.
Don't get frustrated. Call Allison Insurance at 800-580-5587 or 745-2968. Allison Insurance. They are the experts.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Oklahoma. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Oklahoma Secondary School Activities Association and the Oklahoma Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
For over 80 years, Primrose Funeral Service has been providing comfort and guidance during difficult times. Pre-planning with Primrose can help make things a little easier for families. Not only can you pre-plan a funeral, but you can pre-plan your sunset cemetery arrangements, which removes the difficulty of planning for a loss at the same time loved ones are experiencing one. Contact Primrose Funeral Service at 405-321-6000 or visit them online at primrosefuneralservice.com.
Fowler Automotive is proud to be a part of your community, where our passion and values lie far beyond the showroom. We believe that families, sports, art, and culture are at the heart of every thriving community, and it's important to us that we help build the communities that our dealerships call home. Stop by any of our 6 Oklahoma dealerships to see the Fowler standard hard at work. We pride ourselves on being friendly, helpful, honest, and fair. This is what drives us every day. Fowler Automotive, a proud partner of OU Athletics.
Dreaming of your own backyard oasis? Be the envy of your neighborhood and let Signature Custom Pools help you create the perfect poolside paradise. Their professional design expertise can transport you into your own Mystic Falls, suburban sanctuary, or Mediterranean retreat. Settle into an endless vacation, entertain your family, friends, and get the signature touch with Signature Custom Pools. Call them for a free consultation at 405-898-9098 or visit them online at signaturecustompools.com today.
Belmar Golf Club offers a whole new world of recreation and excitement. Our Junior Olympic-sized swimming pool offers a family-friendly atmosphere with poolside food and beverages perfect for all types of summer pool parties. In addition to the best golf course in Oklahoma, Belmar is also a great place to hold corporate and fundraising events, as well as magnificent and memorable wedding ceremonies. Call 405-364-0111 or stop by 1025 East Indian Hills Road and check out our first-class facilities and exceptional service.
That twinge in your knee isn't going to wait until Monday, and neither do we. At Orthostat, we've expanded, so you get better hours, better facilities, and the same great care. Open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Whether it's sprains, strains, fractures, or joint pain, from knuckles to knees and every joint in between, our same-day, affordable care gets you back to life faster. Visit OuchOrthostat.com to learn more.
Ready for some pickleball fun? Join us at the Y-Fac for pickleball every Tuesday from 8 to 11 a.m. and Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. Grab your friends and hit the courts for a lively morning or evening game. If water fitness is your pleasure, Aqua Zuma classes are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Go online at yfac.com to learn more about day passes and memberships.
You're listening to Locked In here on the Ref, the home of Sooner fans. Parker Thune alongside Grayson Singleton. I am at Cavens Group. You can check them out at cavensgroup.com. If ever you find yourself in an emergency situation, obviously we've had cold temperatures recently. Let's say you have a pipe burst. Cavens is available 24/7, 365 for you. If you're in Oklahoma, 405-573-3048. In the break, Gary just came in here with a sample of mold that he took from a sorority house. He didn't tell me which one, which is probably for the best, but found several different species of mold growing on the walls at a sorority house. So if you have moisture in your home, you have a pipe burst, you have any sort of water damage, you're going to want Cavens to check that out because mold's something you really don't want to mess with, folks. And you got water issues, can almost promise you, you will have mold if it's not dealt with expediently and effectively by the folks at Cavens Group. On the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line, 405-651-3439. A 405 listener relevant to our conversation that we were having last segment, Grayson, says, I believe the in-game coaching decision issues are overblown. Not that there are not issues, but I think every game there's clock management issues that are just covered up by teams winning. Winning solves everything, and I don't think BV makes any more clock management mistakes than most other coaches across the country, even the top teams. Look at the questionable stuff from Notre Dame during the championship. Good example, by the way. People only noticed because they lost. What say you, Grayson?
Okay, I do not think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong, but I do think, here's what I would say to that. A coach that can coach through those game management situations, those clock situations late in games, usually that translates to your team being good situationally, keeping yourself in makeable third downs. You're good in the red zone. You don't commit the back-breaking penalty. A lot of those sort of flow hand in hand and are intrinsic with good coaching. Not to say that Brent Venables is a bad coach, but he's not very good in those situations, we know. That's point number one. Point number two, yes, it gets covered up by teams that win, but there are teams that also are bad situationally at a particular point in the game, and they can still find a way to win. That's the part that Oklahoma can't overcome. This past year, and we don't know if they will be this year, we don't know if their offense is going to be good enough and can score enough points to offset their coach sometimes being poor and sometimes dropping the ball in those situational situations. So, yes, sometimes it can be overblown. Andy Reid took a long time to figure out the clock. He had a bunch of gaffes in Philadelphia, but eventually figured it out. And sometimes he had teams that could overcome it. They did go to a Super Bowl in 2004, I believe. So there are ways to overcome it. Can it be overblown? Sure. But I do think it is a concern that if Brent Venables is placed back into play-calling situations or into play-calling duties, those sorts of deficiencies in his coaching game could be magnified.
Florida Sooner on the text line says, hey, Parker, I look at this a little bit differently. I thought the problem with getting rid of Venables was then you had to start over on both sides of the ball, and defense has been what we thought it would be. If you hire Knowles, then if you get rid of Venables, you don't have to start over on the defensive side of the ball, just my outside observation. And that goes back to the conversation we were having about, okay, just the potential of hiring Jim Knowles give Brent Venables an additional measure of job security beyond 2025. But here's the reality, Grayson. If Brent Venables were dismissed, that doesn't necessarily mean Jim Knowles is also dismissed. And as one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, I imagine there would be some level of willingness on the part of whoever the next head coach might be to keep Jim Knowles on staff. But that might not be the case. That new head coach might want to bring in his own DC. Or moreover, Jim Knowles might say, hey, you know what? Okay, this is the end of the line at Oklahoma. I'm going to go take a new job. So needless to say, I don't think you can plan for a world in which Brent Venables is no longer Oklahoma's head coach, but Jim Knowles is still on staff as defensive coordinator. I'm not saying it's a 0% chance, but there are so many other ways that could all play out that you just cannot really bank on that being the reality. Slim Brady asks, how many scholarships does Oklahoma have left? How many scholarships does Oklahoma I think
me neither.
I think everything points toward Jim Knowles being a lifelong defensive coordinator at this point, because you have to imagine, with as long as he's been doing it at a high level since being dismissed as Cornell's head coach in 2009, I mean, we're talking 15 years of continuous excellence as a DC. No doubt he's had opportunities, Grayson. He's had opportunities to go be a head coach. Because you don't do what he does as successfully as he's done it for that long without those opportunities arising. So I don't think it likely that Jim Knowles even wants to be a head coach. And I think it maybe, I guess it seems obvious to me, but maybe it isn't across the board. If you fire a coach, that probably means that you're looking elsewhere for his replacement. You're not promoting from within. Because the reason you promote from within is because you got a good thing going and you don't want to lose it. But if you have a good thing going, the only reason you would lose a coach is if he goes and takes another job. A recent and very successful example of a coach that was promoted from within, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. And the only reason he wound up the head coach in South Bend is because Brian Kelly bounced for LSU. I can't say I can really think offhand of a time where a head coach has been dismissed from an institution and then they have promoted his successor from within the operation. Can you?
The only thing I can think about is what the Las Vegas Raiders did this year with Antonio Pierce. I can't think of one at the college level in recent memory.
Reformed Sooner says, I guess I'm in the minority. I think you stick with BV at least 2 more years. I think he's improved every part of the program since arriving. I believe the wins are coming because of the culture he has created. His biggest mistake was the OC hire, and he has remedied that. Yeah, I think you saw the best and the worst of Brent Venables in 2024. The worst was the hiring of Seth Littrell. Like that, by anyone's standards, that was a mistake. That was a miss. That was a whiff. We all saw it. We all understood it. But I think the best of Brent Venables was how quickly he reacted to it. He did not wait around. He did not feel the need to see it through for an entire season or to let it get any worse than it needed to be. 8 games into the experiment, he fired a guy that won a national championship as a player and a captain at the University of Oklahoma. Not an easy thing to do, Grayson. Not an easy thing for a guy like Seth Littrell, especially when he was owed, I believe, something like $3 million by the university still. Just have that guy walk into your office mid-season and say, you're out. I know it's what all the fans thought needed to happen and what a lot of pundits were coming around to thinking needed to happen. But just because the fans think it needs to happen doesn't mean the head coach sees it that way, doesn't mean the administration sees it that way. It doesn't matter it doesn't mean the people who have an actual iron in the fire see it that way. But Brent Venables validated all of what OU football fans were seeing in his decision to part ways with Seth Littrell, and he wasted virtually no time in doing it. So, I don't know if that
credit to him.
Yeah, like I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse, but Brent Venables did all he could have done after making that mistake in the first place, which is he rectified it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, you don't want to double down on bad decisions. I mean, if you have a decision and it doesn't work out for you, bail on it. And I mean, and he does get credit for that. Bobby and BA on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line. Guys, it's getting tired of hearing the same conversation every day about BV. I am tired of the assumption that BV and OU football will be a failure next year. I support BV in this team. I feel BV will succeed next year. I don't think anybody's assuming OU's going to be a failure of a football program next year, whatever failure is to you. I do think there is a world where it is January 22nd and the college football season is over and, you know, you're forecasting. But I don't think anybody, especially with the additions that Oklahoma's made, that is assuming that OU is going to be a failure next year. Do you get that? Do you get that sense, Parker?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I don't think anybody's going to go into 2025 with terribly lofty expectations for Oklahoma, and that's perfectly natural. And I think that's where you should want the rest of the nation to be if you're an OU fan, because I think you'd feel a lot like Texas if after 6 and 7, and the addition of 2 new coordinators and a portal quarterback, the national media was talking you up as a sleeper contender for the college football playoff. I don't think that's the type of hype you want to be generating, because how many times have you seen a school like Texas garner that type of hype in an offseason? And we can all see through it, right? We all can't figure out why that hype exists, and then inevitably they don't live up to those lofty expectations. So in some of Oklahoma's best years as a football program have come when the expectations kind of all reset. And there wasn't necessarily a lofty standard for the program to live up to. 2000 is a great example. Oklahoma had a modestly successful year in Bob Stoops' first year on the job in 1999. They went 7-5. Another year that comes to mind is 2015. Oklahoma had been 8-5 the year before, lost the Russell Athletic Bowl in thoroughly one-sided fashion. And then the guy that wins the starting quarterback job in fall camp is a walk-on by the name of Baker Mayfield, who unseats the incumbent starter in Trevor Knight. And everybody's thinking, okay, this might be the start of some down years coming up for Oklahoma if this is where they're at. Then, lo and behold, that team runs roughshod over the Big 12 and makes the college football playoff. So I don't mind that expectations for Oklahoma are going to be modest. And I think because of how modest those expectations are, you can only really expect that Oklahoma is going to exceed them, if anything. Because if they don't meet expectations, Grayson, with as mild as those expectations are right now, then it's probably time to clean house.
Look, I said in the last segment that there is no reason to be confident that you would bring him back in 2026, as if 2026 is guaranteed, is what I'm saying there. And I agree with what you just said. I mean, if they don't reach the expectations, whatever the expectations are, because we don't know what they are, is it 8 wins? Is it 9 wins? Is it 7-6? But it's the right 7-6 that keeps you around. We don't know. But the truth of the matter is, right now, however you want to slice it, this is where you are. And look, maybe the reset of expectations does help. Maybe there were too many expectations with Oklahoma being ranked, what was it, 16 in the first AP poll going into the year, somewhere in that nature. Maybe that was a little bit too high. They probably won't be ranked in the top 25. Maybe that serves as a motivation. That underdog mentality pushes them over the top into a stratosphere that we don't see them being in right now.
Yeah,
maybe that helps.
And I'm not necessarily saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I think this will happen. I do think, actually, that Oklahoma will open the season in the top 25, if only for the sake of John Mateer at the quarterback position. I think the AP voters are probably going to look at the fact that Oklahoma brought in arguably the number one player in the transfer portal, and they're going to be one of those teams that you take a gander on with one of your final selections for the top 25. Every single year feels like everybody has a pretty solid handle on what the top 5-10 teams should be at the outset. But then it's a lot of dart throwing because you don't know what you don't know about any of these teams. You got to see it on the field, and so you're just kind of filling it out from there. So I'll bet you Oklahoma opens somewhere in the 20 to 25 range in the AP poll. Again, I'm not saying that's fair or unfair, but that would be my expectation. Florida Sooner with a very, very cynical outlook on the text line. He says, I'm on the opposite side of both you guys. I don't think enough changed on the offensive side of the ball, i.e. DeMarco and Joe John, to be as improved as we need to be. I pick Oklahoma to go, get this, 4-8 next year. They go 4-8, it's over. And I know we just had the whole conversation about the addition of Jim Knowles, giving Brent Venables a little bit more runway, if you will, but everybody's runway dries up. If you go 4-8, it's over for everybody.
4-8.
You go 4-8, it's a complete overhaul because it has to be.
If you are flirting with 4-8, I don't think Brent Venables survives past Halloween.
Well, Brent Venables has already, certainly not from us, but elsewhere, Brent Venables has drawn the John Blake comparisons already.
Oh, yeah.
The last guy to go 4-8 at Oklahoma was John Blake. So if that happens, yeah, it's over. But
why'd you have to bring that up?
I just don't see a way that Oklahoma goes, or that the season goes that. I mean, at that point, we're talking about Oklahoma winning no more than one conference game Or I should say no more than 2. I guess maybe you drop that non-con to Michigan. There's a world where that could happen. But you're talking about Oklahoma winning no more than 2 non-conference games. I get that that's all they won in 2024. But with the rash of injuries, midseason firing to the OC, the deck is not going to be stacked against you in 2025 the way that it was in 2024. There's no way, right? There's no way they could go 4-8. If they do, yeah, clear everybody out.
I can't see that. I mean, I know you've got the game against Michigan, which takes away an automatic win from what you had last year, or we thought you had last year. 4-8, that means, do you have to know how unlucky Oklahoma would have to be to go 4-8? That means every single bounce, because Oklahoma's going to be in close games, if nothing else because of their defense. Every single bounce of the ball went the other way if you go 4-8. I don't see that. I don't see that remotely close to happening. I'm not going to call you an idiot because I was called an idiot when I came on these airwaves and said Oklahoma was going to win no more than 8 games my first month on this job. I'm not going to do that to you, but that seems wildly adventurous.
Okay, folks, we got to hit a timeout here. When we come back, we'll wrap up Locked In with more of your texts, 405-651-3439. You're listening to The Ref, the home of Sooner fans. We'll be back on the other side. Stay with us.
Horns Down Apple Pie Liquor is not your grandma's apple pie unless your grandma was a moonshiner with a PhD in flavor. This all-natural 6-time distilled spirit is sure to light up any party, tailgate, or special occasion. Whether toasting a touchdown or yelling at the Yums because Spike was safe, Horns Down Apple Pie is the perfect drink for celebrating the highs and lows of life in Oklahoma. Horns Down celebrates all of you who cheer from the berm, tailgate, on Lindsay Streak, and wreak havoc on social media. You can find our red bottle at your local liquor store or search for your closest location at drinkhornsdown.com.
Greg from Lawton on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line has chimed in with a good text, and one I want to read here. To kick off the final segment of Locked In here on the Ref, the home of Sooner fans, Parker Thune, Grayson Singleton. He said, let's talk offensive or defensive schemes. Gotta lay this type of conversation to bed. I can't continue down this path day after day. Not laying blame by any means, just trying to change the talking points to something with hope, not reliving the pain of last season each and every day we all tune in. We said it at the time. Once things really started to go downhill for OU football circa October, that it was going to be a long offseason. And this is what a long offseason looks like, Greg. I mean, it's January. We got 7+ months till a new football season starts. And fortunately, you got OU well, I don't know if that's fortunate in everybody's minds, but you do have OU hoops. You're going to have OU softball starting up soon. You'll have baseball. You'll have other things to get you through the offseason, no doubt. But OU hoops didn't have a midweek game this week. Softball hasn't started up yet. We're all waiting with bated breath to see when Oklahoma will hire their next defensive coordinator, but especially when they do hire Jim Knowles. And the brutal reality is there's only so much to talk about with regard to both the future and the past. And we got to get through 7 months of no OU football together. So the conversation won't always be pleasant. You go 6-7 for the second time in 3 years, it's not going to be pleasant. In fact, it will be quite unpleasant at times. But that's what we're here to do with all of you, is to hear your grievances, air our own, commiserate, share the outlook for what the future might hold with this program if they manage to hire Jim Knowles, or given that they have hired Ben Arbuckle. One way or another, Greg, again, it's a simple observation, but it's the truth. It's going to be a really long off season. This is the way it is when your program isn't winning. And when they're winning, everything's great. And there was a time not too long ago where Oklahoma was winning like very few other programs in college football. Those days are gone. And the Sooners, you feel like you're the Israelites in the wilderness to a certain extent. When will you catch a glimpse of the promised land again? Everybody on the text line, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of folks on the text line have been asking questions all day. I guess because there was a photo that surfaced of Joe John Finley, among other OU staffers, down there at Frisco Lone Star High School today doing in-person visits. Everybody's like, why is Joe John Finley still on staff? Listen, I don't make these decisions, okay? He's on staff because the powers that be, the people who do make those decisions, still believe that he is worthy of being the tight ends coach at the University of Oklahoma. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that is the current reality. But to that point, or on that note, I should say, the OU staff is out there doing in-person visits right now, and you see a similar theme historically every time they get out this time of year during the contact period and make trips. They're always down in the state of Florida pretty quickly once the contact period opens. OU hasn't really made substantial inroads in Florida yet under Venables, but they have demonstrated the ability to pull a few dudes out of that state. And I'm talking guys that are actually from Florida. Obviously, they got David Stone and Jaden Jackson from IMG, but David Stone was an Oklahoma local. Jaden Jackson was originally from Indiana. So Oklahoma has shown the propensity to go into the state of Florida and grab a guy like an Eddie Pierre-Louis or a guy like Lewis Carter, for instance. I know that didn't last, but that was another Florida guy that they went and landed. Now the question becomes, can they really start to solidify those ties, those relationships, those inroads now that they are in the SEC? Because it's going to be more important than ever before. But generally, as quickly as you see them down in Florida, they are right back in the central time zone in the states of Oklahoma and Texas. And I got to count all these guys in the photo today that were down at Frisco Lone Star because there were a lot of them. And obviously OU has a commit there in three-star tight end Ryder Mix. But you had Brent Venables at Lone Star. You had Joe John Finley. You had Ben Arbuckle, Emmett Jones, Jay Valai, and J.P. Lossman. And J.P. Lossman is out on the road and can be out on the road because Oklahoma doesn't have a defensive coordinator right now. So you can have 11 coaches out recruiting. J.P. Lossman is filling the role that would otherwise be occupied by Zach Alley, or if and when a guy like Jim Knowles is hired, he will be the one out there on the road in place of J.P. Lossman. But Lossman is the director of player personnel for the defensive side of the ball, and so he has been out with the coaches as well. Emmett Jones checked in with Mason James, the outstanding 4-star wide receiver from Norman North High School, on Monday afternoon. Yesterday he was down in the Houston area checking in on another fantastic wide receiver that camped at Oklahoma this past summer and has since really blown up on the recruiting trail. That's Jaden Warren out of Iowa Colony High School. Again, you saw Bill Biedenbow making the rounds in the Dallas area. I'm told the OU staff was not only at Lone Star High School this morning, but they were also at Mesquite Horn. And so the focus, Grayson, seems to be exactly what it has been in recent years from a recruiting standpoint for Oklahoma, which is make sure that locally you remain a player, you remain a contender, you remain on the minds of these prospects and their high school coaches and recruiting coordinators, but also do your best to continue chipping away at the Southeast recruiting base, because it's not as easy to pull guys from that area for Venables as it probably was at Clemson, given the geographical distance. But in the SEC, you want to be able to go to places like Florida and Georgia and say, come play at Oklahoma instead of going to Auburn, or instead of going to UF, or instead of going to LSU, Ole Miss, what have you.
Well, LSU and Florida, you may not win that battle, but Auburn, you should be able to say, hey, come play for the Sooners rather than go to the second school in the state of Alabama. So I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there, but you're right. And it's good to see that they're starting in their neighborhood. The visit with Mason James caught my eye the other day. How good, because I saw his size and I've seen some of the film from some of the camps. This defensive end from IMG that they brought the entire contingent down to go see.
Yeah, Jake Krell.
How this kid looks good. If anything, I haven't seen any of his in-game film. I've just seen his workouts. If anything, this kid looks nasty.
Oh, he is, man. And what's crazy about him is, and you can kind of tell in the picture, he's not that big.
Well, I think he was, 6'2", 6'3", 235 is what he is
yeah,
right now?
I'd put him at 6'2". I don't know if I'd give him 6'3", but he is absolutely, and I got the chance to see him in person at Jacksonville, down in Jacksonville this past June at the Rivals 5-Star. He is absolutely one of the most vicious football players I've ever seen.
I'll say, he looks terrifying when I watch him.
Man. He plays angry. Angrier than hardly anybody else. Which, you're that size. I mean, you have decent size at that point. You have size enough to make you a G5 type of guy if you have the athletic traits. But somebody of that stature these days isn't going to be a P4 prospect unless they have something that puts them over the top, something a little bit extra. And Jake Krell has that. He is vicious.
Parker, let me stop you there, because there was another really good edge rusher in the state of Oklahoma that has similar size. Now, he ended up going to Oklahoma State, and you may know who I'm talking about. But those measurables seem very, very similar to Colin Oliver.
Yeah, I knew that's the direction you were going with Colin Oliver. No doubt about it. And
fast guy off the edge, can play with he'll learn to play with his hand to the ground. But I think of a guy, and I was gonna ask you this question. Nick Benito didn't really have the weight of your typical SEC. I know they were in the Big 12 at that point. Didn't have the weight of your typical SEC defensive end, but he also was a demon off the edge because he could rush from a 2-point stance. Do you see Krell with playing a role like that?
Yeah, so what makes Krell unique is that, you think about those undersized Florida edge rushers that Oklahoma has had in recent years that have really boomed. Nick Benito being one, R. Mason Thomas being another current example. Krell is more built. He's more muscled up than those two were in high school. I think Benito, when he graduated high school, was 199.
Really?
Yeah, he was way light. And R. Mason Thomas, when he showed up to Oklahoma, was 216 pounds. Jake Krell is listed at 230. He probably fluctuates in that 230, 235 range. but he's got a really, really well-defined upper body, like big biceps, a ton of muscle on that frame already, which is why, you think about what Nick Benito was as a prospect, what R. Mason Thomas was as a prospect, depending on what service you go by, both Nick Benito and R. Mason Thomas were low 4-star, high 3-star dudes. You look at where Jake Krell is ranked across the board, 24/7 Sports has him as the number 56 player in the nation. Not the number 56 defensive end, the number 56 player. Rivals has him as the number 55 player in the nation, number 4 defensive end. Point is, with those measurables, the industry doesn't think that highly of you unless you are freakish in all the right ways. And Jake Krell is. And he really, really likes the University of Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma will get an official visit from him. Do they lead for his services? I'm not sure I would go that far. I'm not sure whether I would say Oklahoma has an outright lead, but they are up there, man. They are up there. Jake Krell really, really likes Oklahoma.
Who do you think is the leader in the clubhouse right now for him?
I don't know if there is one.
Okay.
Like, I would just as soon say Oklahoma as any other school, but I don't know if we're to the point where he has a clearly defined idea of where he is leaning or where he would like to go. I know he really, really likes Ohio State, really, really likes Alabama. Lloyd says, show us your journalistic versatility and talk positively about all OU sports. Us OU fans need to be positive too. I'm trying, Lloyd. Here we are talking about a guy that could be a cornerstone of Oklahoma's 2026 class if Miguel Chavis and the Sooners could close the deal. Glenn from Nashville says, R. Mason Thomas was very underrated as a high school player. Don't forget he originally had committed to Iowa State. The big programs were not after him. You're right, not until the very end, because Oklahoma offered him, a month and a half, maybe a little less than 2 months before National Signing Day. At the time, he was committed to Iowa State, but they weren't the only school that started to come around for R. Mason Thomas. LSU wanted him. Miami wanted him. I'm fairly certain Georgia may have offered him. But OU got him on an official visit, closed the deal. He's going to make me look so smart when he's a day 1, day 2 NFL draft pick this time next year, because, man, I was so high on R. Mason Thomas. I don't know if I've ever been as right on anybody as I was about R. Mason Thomas. I'll pull the receipts. I'll go pull those takes from, February of 2022 where I'm saying this dude is going to be an absolute machine at Oklahoma. Don't care what he weighs. He's going to be awesome. And he has been for Oklahoma so far. Okay, we're out of time here on Locked In. Ted and Tyler coming up next. They will take you all the way to 6 p.m. on The Rush. Thanks for hanging with me and Grayson. We will be back tomorrow afternoon at 12 o'clock for more OU football recruiting. Maybe some hoops talk. We'll see. Regardless, The Rush is coming up. Don't go anywhere. Keep it here.